Hey everybody, Audrey here, the Fit, Fearless, and Faithful Mom. Thanks so much for joining me today. If it's your first time, thanks for stopping by. I would love for you to tap that subscribe button. And if you're feeling fun, fancy, tap that little bell so you get notifications of when I am doing a video. I relate fitness to faith. I talk a little bit about homeschool life and being the daughter of Christ. So let's get talking about funerals. I recently went to the funeral of my husband's uncle, and it struck me in a new way that I have never been struck before, and I really think it's because I am studying even more, getting to know the Lord on a whole different level, a whole new beautiful level. And so when I was at this funeral, we're gonna break this up into two parts. When I was at this funeral, I felt really close to God. And although I didn't know Uncle Lee, I felt close to him. And it's not the first time at a funeral that I have felt close to someone in this way. It's been a long time. But what I thought as I was kneeling in front of his casket and throughout the whole mass, no matter what, this man has seen the face of God. It struck me in such a beautiful way. I hope and pray that Uncle Lee is in heaven right now, or he's not spending much time in purgatory. He was very devoted to the church. He was a carpenter, and he spent a lot of time with my husband. He was such a great man for my husband to have in his life, because my husband didn't grow up with a father, and so Uncle Lee taught him carpentry, and they built a massive shed together. I think the shed at grandma's is like 20 by 30. Dog house in the back, it like looks like a house that used to protect. But Uncle Lee was remarkable. So he did a lot of carpentry work for his church. He and Aunt Loretta were Eucharistic ministers. They were heavily involved in the church. And so I kept thinking, like, you've seen God. I'm kind of jealous in a way, but it's so beautiful. It's amazing. So I've been praying, the kids have been praying for his soul continuously every single day. And so part 2 of this is gonna be on funeral etiquette. Even if you are Catholic, just, some quick reminders, just some things that I saw during the funeral that we might want to keep in mind, whether you're Catholic or not. So first things first is when you arrive at the church, because sometimes they have the viewing before Mass. If there's a sudden death, sometimes the family does not have a viewing at a funeral home. There's a viewing prior to Mass. And so even though it's a viewing, we still want to be respectful of the house of the Lord. So, still bless yourself, reverently walk up to the casket, pray for that soul, visit with the family that you're going to see, and then sit down in the pew. It's not a social gathering time. It's not an appropriate time to stand there and, catch up with the family and, kibitz about and whatnot. I think we need to be a little bit more reverent in God's house. So then sitting down in the pew and praying, reflecting. Now, when the Mass starts, it is out of respect that you stand when the casket is being rolled in by the family as the family processes in. It is customary to stand, and then once the Mass starts, it's pretty much your normal Mass. Now, here is how sometimes we kind of act like sheep, and then when we're not in our normal zone of the Mass, it's like people forget the prayers to say. So help each other out. A funeral Mass is no different. So especially if we have non-Catholics who are around us, they may not know the prayers and they may not know what to do or say. So kind of help them out a little bit. But you stand and kneel all the same. We still respect the sacrament and we still respect the Eucharist, especially during consecration. Now, if you are not Catholic, I highly encourage you to follow us along in how we respect the Mass, and how we respect Christ, and how we respect the person who has been deceased. I'll discourage you from making fun of how many times we kneel or how many times we say certain prayers. I understand that you may not understand what's going on, and that's okay. There may be a Catholic or someone who can explain it to you, why we kneel when we do, why we say certain prayers, why certain readings are happening, and so forth. So, but save that until after Mass. Now here's where it gets a little bit confusing, is during communion time. The only individuals who should be receiving communion, no matter if it's a funeral Mass or a regular Sunday Mass, are those who are in full communion with Christ, which means that you are in a state of grace. And being in a state of grace means that we are free from mortal sin and really even venial sin. You know, we should be completely clean. So even if you're Catholic, if you have not been to confession in a while, I really encourage you to do so. And if you're not in a state of grace, then you should not be receiving communion. So if you're not going to be receiving communion, you have two options. You can either sit in the pew and stay there, or if you find yourself in line and you are going up, simply place your arms across your chest, and it is a sign that I cannot receive. So if you're not Catholic, you should not be receiving the Eucharist. And that's okay. It's okay to not be able to receive the Eucharist unless you are in full communion with Christ, unless you have received the sacrament in its entirety. So what are you going to see during a funeral? Well, you're going to see the pall, which is the white linen that is draped over the coffin. And that is, so think about your baptism, right? At baptism, you're draped with a white cloth as a sign of purity. And so at death, it is signifying our baptism, because then water is sprinkled over the coffin. Now, then the coffin is incensed. Okay, they take incense and they incense all around the coffin. And it's a sign of respect and prayers rising up to heaven for that soul. Just as at baptism, we have our baptism candle, one last time, the Paschal candle is lit. And, you know, with death, you know, life has not ended. It has just changed. Our status has changed. Because remember that your body is on loan. You know, our soul is within us completely. So, you know, we're just like these bodies that are moving around, and our soul is within us. So life has not ended, just our status has changed. Usually when the Mass has ended, the pallbearers will, you know, process out with the deceased. Everyone will then process out, get into their cars, everyone's got their flashers on. Usually you have to drive to the cemetery. Now, all Catholics should have a Catholic Mass said and be buried in a Catholic cemetery. That is super important. Please remember that. Yeah, just as a side note, Cody and I updated our wills, but what we also have done is we've actually set up the Mass in case we die. And that sounds kind of morbid, but you know, I don't want my family having to worry about picking out readings, assigning readings, or anything like that. So God forbid something happens to myself or Cody, the Mass is done. The Mass is done. We have like the priest who will preside over the Mass. We have who will do the readings, who will do the eulogy, what songs will be sung, and I'll put links below for that too. For how to do all the readings and whatnot for your funeral. Again, sounds a little morbid, but you know, we're called and we're asked to have a Catholic Mass. You know, we came into full communion with Christ, with God at our baptism, and so we want to leave in, you know, the same way. So anyway, back to this. When you go to the cemetery, again, whether you're Catholic or not, just be respectful of what's happening. Get there on time and, you know, follow along with what the priest does. What can you do afterwards? Well, you should have already sent a Mass card to the deceased family. whoever the family members are, if it's a widow, a widower, the children of the deceased. You should have sent a mass card. If you haven't done so already, send one. I'll put links below on where you can get mass cards from. You can pray for them continuously, pray for their souls. Then you can have mass said for them, which is such a beautiful gift. And I believe we get indulgences whenever we offer up the graces from the Eucharist for those souls who are in purgatory or the souls of the deceased, as well as saying mass for them too, which you can contact your local parish if you want to have mass said for an individual. Some churches have a really long waiting list for masses to be said. I think my sister, her church is massive, and they're on, it takes like a year or so, maybe, I think it takes maybe even longer than that for a mass to be said, but check with your church. I remember my mom always has done this from the time when, as far back as I can remember, whenever a family member has passed away, she always has mass said for them on the day of their, or is it birthday? I'm gonna have to check with her. It has to be on their death. I'm pretty sure it has to be on their death, but I'm not sure why I'm thinking on their birthday. That can't be right. I'm gonna have to check with her. But anyway, I remember her saying like, we have to go to the 9:15 mass this week and not 8 o'clock because it's being said for Grandma Zemo. Or this week it's being said for, you know, Grandma Brunetto or something like that, you know, or, you know, some other family member. But my mom has always had masses said for family members. Continuously pray for the family because, you know, even after years have passed, like they're still mourning. And it also is a really nice gesture to go to the cemetery and pay them honor. Again, indulgences are offered, especially during the month of November, the first 7 days of the month, lots of indulgences. It's really important to pray for the deceased. All right, everybody, so this was a little bit different video, but just some things to consider if you're going to a Catholic funeral. We should all have a Catholic mass said for us, and make sure that you are buried in a Catholic cemetery. God bless all of you. If I can pray for you in any way, please let me know. If you still hung out with me for this video and you're new, feel free to tap that subscribe button. It'll help me out, and hit that like button. Have a great week, everybody. Take care. Bye.